Welcome to Generation Flex, where we bring generationally diverse perspectives to burning challenges. Have you ever felt like you had to wedge yourself in order to be accepted in a particular situation? Have you ever felt like there's a part of your identity that you just had to downplay so that you could be the one who's a part of a group or a community? Well, today's issue is respectability politics, a term that has nothing to do with candidates or lawmaking and everything to do with gaining and maintaining respect. Respectability politics is defined as a set of beliefs holding that conformity to prescribed mainstream standards of appearance and behavior will protect a person who is part of a marginalized group from prejudices and systemic injustices. Now, I have three amazing guests here with me today to break it all down. First, I have Cheryl Grace, who is our boomer. Cheryl is an executive coach and entrepreneur. Welcome, Cheryl. I have Chris Powell, who is Gen X. Chris is a technology entrepreneur. And I have Channing Leonard. Channing is Gen Z, millennial. And he is a philanthropic practitioner. So let's jump right into this. What did you think when you heard this term, respectability politics? Because personally, I had not heard the term before we start planning this episode. So
I'm with
what do you
you.
think?
I was like, what the heck is this? Melissa has introduced me to a new term. And then when I read it, the definition and saw that it had been around since 1993, I'm like, how have I not heard of this? I've spent my life working in this area. How am I not familiar with it?
We've been doing it.
Yes.
Seems like a lifetime.
We've just been doing it.
Absolutely.
We didn't know there was a name to it.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
Exactly. I had to do my homework on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what'd you learn when you did your homework?
Well, to the point, it's like it's been around for a long time. I wasn't aware of it, but as I delve into it, I was like, oh, I know this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm familiar with
It's
this.
who you are.
Right.
Is it because you've had to?
I've navigated.
You've navigated it. Okay.
Yeah.
And how about you, Channing?
So the idealist in me wants to believe that this doesn't exist, and I do want to live in a world where this doesn't have to exist.
Right.
But I think the realist in me and the pragmatist in me understands that it's necessary, and we have to build credibility before we can really demonstrate our authentic selves in the workplace and as we build credibility and respect, in society.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback on that and say that I have a lot of young folks who come to me as part of my coaching, and they want to know why they haven't gotten a promotion. One young woman showed up, and she had a scarf on her head when we met.
Like
and
tied in,
like a
yep.
headscarf
Yes.
tied around
Yes.
your head.
Yes.
And I said, oh, so you had the day off. And she said, no, I went to work today. I said, oh, sweetheart, that's why you're not getting a promotion. You're showing up at work like this. And she goes, but what do? I work out in the morning. So I have to tend to my hair. I said, they don't understand that. You don't have time to teach them. And it's something that they're buzzing about when you're not in the room.
And what job is she doing?
She was in advertising.
Okay.
So it was creative, but they're not quite there yet. So
And by the they and there and they, we're talking about basically dominant cultures.
yes.
Right? So whoever is in control, whoever is making the rules may be a little bit, sort of thrown off by some of these, the way we can show up. Not that it's bad or wrong, it's just not understood.
Well, go on,
Well,
Chris.
Cheryl, excuse me for 2 seconds, but you just raised something that's near and dear to my heart because we measure culture. And one of the things we talk about are these explicit and implicit behavior patterns that organizations have, and they are not always articulated. And so you're constantly trying to figure out how to show up and be so that you can do. And so when I started going into my work on this, I was like, oh my God, this unpacking this was heavy.
Yeah?
And
Yeah,
it's just really not sustainable, though, too. I think the Chicago Cook Workforce Partnership a couple weeks ago put out some new data. Black males in the workforce, the labor force participation rate, 53%. That's lower than other major cities. We have to have, our employer sector has to find ways to create cultures of inclusivity and to allow for us to present as BIPOC, as people of color in the workplace. So I think that there's the world as it is, but we can create a new world. And I think that 2020 and the uprisings and George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, COVID-19 certainly, I think that's an inflection point that we can adjust and be better. So I think I'm hoping that we won't have to deal with these issues 20 years from now.
So listen,
Oh, here we go. What we got?
Listen,
you know, when George Floyd happened in 2020, I gave it 18 to 24 months that the companies would be on the bandwagon of changing culture.
I call it a coma.
Yes.
There was a corporate coma.
And
they were
they're
going
coming
into.
out of that coma.
They're coming out
They're
of the
coming
coma.
out. It's not going to last. You talk about sustainability. It's not going to last because it's very difficult for folks who are still in charge, who tend to be older white males in most industries, to adapt and adjust. I've done my part. I gave to all of these black universities and colleges, and I've done everything that I could. It's time for us to get back to normal.
But when we talk about sustainability, 20 years from now, this is going to be a majority BIPOC country.
Yes, it is.
Right.
So I think that they're going to have to adjust to our standards as well. I mean, I think we have to meet in the middle. Like I said, I'm a pragmatist. But I think that the supply side is going to have to understand that this country is going to look very different in 20 years from now.
Let's
Let's
scare
be
the
clear.
bejesus
Let's
out of
be
them.
clear about
Okay.
one thing, because you used a term, and generationally, it may not.
Explanatory comma, I got you. I got you.
BIPOC.
Yep.
BIPOC.
Yes.
Explain that.
Black, indigenous, and other people of color. I don't love the term. I think people of color is fine, but I think that there's an understanding that we need to center the particular marginalization that black and indigenous people have experienced in this country.
Okay. Just wanted to be clear. We just want to put that out on the table, because that's also a generational flex too.
And it's getting
because we
so-
just said black folks. You know,
It's getting so complicated.
I agree.
Can't
I
just
agree.
be.
I
You
agree.
just
I
said
agree.
we just want to be.
Right.
We just can't be.
Be.
Now we got to be all these A, B, C, D. Like it's complicated.
I call it the curse of the commas. We're this and we're that and we're the other.
Well,
Go ahead.
I want to go back to something Cheryl was talking about, the time horizon of our attention span on change. And I was talking to somebody the other day, I said, to your point around the focus around creating more inclusive cultures, then you got the talk of an impeding recession, which means reduction. And so the fear of people being out of jobs and using whatever path that they think they need to do to preserve their well-being. So this is an interesting intersection of time of watching these cycles. And I think being a Gen X, having been in the workforce, I've seen cycles now of like these inflection moments. Man, we missed it.
Yes.
We made some
Yeah.
progress. I'm not going to say we didn't make some.
Yeah.
Right.
But we didn't really seize the moment. The carpe diem,
Yeah.
seize the day. We haven't seized the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought we seized it in 2020, but I thought we seized it for about 24 months, and we're coming up on
Yeah.
the end of that.
I do think that some of the coma, I call it a coma. I think some of that is wearing off. I think there is a sense of, we need to get back to normal, right? However, we also know that we're in a war for talent. So I have to make some adjustments if I'm going to be competitive on any level, right? And what happened during 2020? Angel Mama lost her job. Uncle Ben lost his job. Like there's imagery that just was no longer being accepted.
Is the cream of wheat man still around?
He might be called something else now, but he's,
Well, Melissa, you said something about going back to normal, but I think that the point that we're losing with some of these, corporate sloganeering,
Yes.
we're losing that normal.
Sloganeering.
Whoa, but normal wasn't working for so many of our communities, particularly
Absolutely.
here in Chicago.
Right.
So I think that's why we're
Absolutely.
seeing. So I think that we're trying to hold on to as much momentum as we can, and we've seen some progress. I think that the Congress recently passed the Crown Act,
Which is wonderful.
which made it illegal to discriminate based on hairstyles. Obviously, so that's some meat to that. But I think that we have to understand moving forward that normal wasn't okay for a large segment of us, particularly from our community.
Yeah, no, I don't think normal was okay
Okay
for
for
any
any
of
of
us.
us.
We weren't included in the
We
definition.
learned how to survive, right? And part of that learning how to survive was understanding what land am I in right now? Because you come into an organization, you could very well be that elephant in the land of penguins. So I can't just go in here, and just start tooting my, my trunk. I got to figure penguins waddle. Okay, well I might be too big to waddle, but how am I going to navigate this same space So just that presence may create the change that we all need and want. I think there is a sense of, you use the term intersection of time. There is an intersection of, in some cases, morality, decorum. It's changing.
Decorum.
Good word. Yeah.
My favorite word, decorum.
Decorum is good.
The world is in need of some decorum today. And I see it happening in airports where people are showing up wearing their pajamas, where they're wearing those bonnets, those satin sleeping bonnets that I don't allow outside of the bedroom in my house. And yet there we are in an airport, and it's gotten worse. I have been on conference calls on Zoom where people have shown up wearing them at home, their home, in a work Zoom call.
Yes, I've seen that too.
Yes.
I have a very good friend of mine who she gets fully dressed for her Zoom calls at home in her office.
It's a mindset.
So it is a mindset.
It is a mindset.
But you have to tell people, because for me, when you're learning the rules of a game, and let's face it, work is a
100%
game.
It is a game.
And so you don't sit down and play a board game without someone giving you the rules.
rules.
You're lucky if you have one of us boomers to pull you to the side and say, sweetie, let me tell you the rules.
Yes.
If you want to win at this game. Now, you can show up however you want,
Yes.
Right.
satin bonnet and all.
Yes.
But don't come to me saying, I'm not getting a promotion, and I don't know why.
As we start to get welcomed to the spaces, I think we have to understand where the center of gravity is. I'm not going to talk to my barber the same way that I'm going to talk to my board of directors. I think that when I'm kind of mentoring younger folks, I think you have to assess where the center of gravity is, start to prove yourself, and then inch your way into your more authentic self. That's the advice I'd like to
And
give.
I think that's really what this respectability politics is around as well, right? There is a sense of, sort of camouflaging.
Code switching.
Code switch.
Code switching, yeah.
Covering. There's a lot of terms out there, right? That's describing this need to morph and shape and
We just called it old-fashioned assimilation back in my day.
I think that's worse, though. I think you lose your identity when you assimilate.
You did lose your identity.
Well,
it was how you survived.
You at least put
and
it on
it's how-
pause for
and it's
8-9
how you-
hours.
Yeah, you did.
Go ahead, Chris.
Well, no, this is interesting. We're talking about identity, right? And so, we talk about from a generation standpoint, right? So, when I was in school in undergrad and coming into the workforce in the mid '90s, guess what? You were black, white, Hispanic, Asian, and that was about it. There wasn't all these other definitions.
4 boxes
You
to
had
check.
4 boxes to check, right? And then I was chatting with somebody the other day. I said this whole idea of identity, it's getting more and more refined. The tail is just getting longer and longer of things that you can identify as. So when we think about authenticity and your point of reference of who you are relative to the rest of the world, it's a constant navigation.
Sure.
It's a constant navigation.
Well, we're just getting started. We'll be right back after this.
Hello, I'm Christina Steed, host of For the Culture. Join me each week as we delve into engaging conversations with dynamic guests to get their unique perspectives on culture and life. We'll cover a spectrum of issues and narratives distinctive to the Chicagoland area. Smart, unique, and dope conversations with a decidedly Chicago flavor. For the Culture airs Tuesdays at 7 p.m. on CanTV 19 and streaming on cantv.org.
Change Agents places a spotlight on critical issues impacting Chicago's communities, including homelessness, gender-based violence, food inequity, bail reform, hate crimes, police reform, school bullying, the list goes on. Each week, we'll introduce you to the community organizations and leaders who are working on the front lines to address and combat these issues. Join me for Change Agents, Thursdays at 7 p.m. on CanTV 19 and streaming live on cantv.org.
Welcome back to Generation Flex. Now, let's explore if there's any upside to respectability politics. It seems unavoidable to me. So in some cases, you want to gain access, you want to influence, and in other cases, you just want to be yourself, right? So what is to be gained by playing this respectability politics game, or the conscious covering, or the code switch, whichever term is sort of landing and resonating. What's to be gained?
It depends on what you're after,
Say
right?
more.
So you enter a certain workforce environment with the aspirations of being, doing, or having something. Whether it's tenure at a university or whether it's corporate America. So what do you want? So going in knowing what you're after is going to impact how you play that game. And so if I want to be unique, then I'm going to take my unique self in there. But if I want to climb a corporate ladder, then I'm going to take my corporate self in there. And that is what I'm going to gain because that's what I'm seeking. Sometimes people don't know what they're seeking, so they don't know how to show up.
And sometimes the workplace, I love what you're saying because the workplace, I tend to think of it as that's the bilateral contract. If I go in there and I'm coming in there to bring my talents, my experience, my expertise, and I'm going to commit to doing my best, I expect the organization, you're going to pay me or you're going to promote me or you're going to develop me. It's going to be a gain. But what do I want? And a lot of people are not clear about what is it that I want to gain,
Right.
or not clear about what does it take to gain.
What does it
and
take?
there are written and unwritten rules to making those things happen,
Yes.
right? So what do you see as the upside?
To a
Jay?
certain degree, it makes me think of that old adage that probably your old generation is more familiar than mine. That you catch more flies with honey than vinegar. So I do believe that playing the respectability politics game, I think that you're able to build consensus to a certain degree. But that tension is always there. Am I sacrificing something at the expense of that? But I certainly think there's plenty of upside to that. I certainly think that I was a poster boy for respectability politics on a lot of my career. So I think that as you kind of achieve in your career, I do believe it's necessary. Absolutely.
Can you say a little bit more about? You said you were a poster boy for it. What do you mean?
So now, I'm as you mentioned, philanthropic practitioner. I'm on the grant making side. I used to be on the grant seeking side. So
Okay.
I used to have to generate resources for the organizations that I work for in the nonprofit sector. So I feel like you could internalize, if I look a certain way, am I not going to close this gift or this grant? And so I think that now that maybe because I've switched in the sector, maybe because I've advanced in my career, I've adjusted that thinking, but I absolutely think there's a certain assimilation early on in your career, absolutely.
You know, that word assimilation used to feel so dirty. Like, ew, assimilation. I feel like it's just another tool in the toolkit.
It is another tool. I would agree.
Yeah, I totally agree with you because I think part of the upside, at least from a personal experience, is being able to navigate at the level in the rooms and the rarefied air that I'm so fortunate to get to play in at times,
Yeah.
so that I can be effective too. Back to your point, Cheryl, I can get what I came for.
Right.
Because I'm clear about that. But to your point, not everybody's clear about their why.
They're not clear about it. And if you're at the table,
Why,
and
the how, the when.
there's so much,
W's.
so much uncertainty out there. But if you are at the table and you're not sure what you're supposed to do when you're there, that's a problem to begin with. But at least how you're showing up and receiving the attention. The upside for me is you're getting the attention because you at least look like you belong. If you're playing one of those Sesame Street games, one of these things is not like the other, right? So if you are like sitting there playing that game, then you're already not winning.
Right.
So that's what I think you are gaining. That's an upside to showing up the way the rest of the crew looks.
Well, Cheryl, to that point, I coach some younger folks in their career, and I said, early in my career, I got some advice, and he said, Chris, get in the room, look, listen, and learn.
Yes.
You don't want to be a distraction, because if you're a distraction, you're not going to get what you need out of this. And so that whole piece of being able to show up, to know that, oh, I'm here to learn, so let me make sure that, hey, everything else about me at this moment is not a distraction, so I can come back to being clear about why I was there. Right?
Who has residence in this meeting? Who has influence? And
Yes.
what are people responding
Who's
to
who?
in this room?
Yes,
That's right.
yes,
That's
exactly.
right.
Reading the room.
Once upon a time, we were told you need to be seen and not heard. And on some of that is, as children, we're told be seen and not heard. But you could be an astute child and a lot goes in. Like you learned a lot.
Just listening.
Just
Listening.
listening.
Active
Just listening. And you know, I've been in several different industries in my career, and you can tell who was in the room and kind of heard some of those things young, because they come in, you know, right off the college campus, just like knowing some things, right? And so there's a little bit of an advantage, right?
Yep.
And that's some of that unspoken rule, but they come in knowing some of these things. So the listening is so important. And then figuring out, I think, well, how does Jack make decisions? Oh, who listens to Cheryl? Who listens to Greg? How do they,
How
you
do they
know,
deal with
and figuring
conflict?
out who's who and what some of those sort of, we'll call them idiosyncrasies and preferences and nuances are. That's how you start to put your game plan together.
I think and I think that's
Yes.
such great advice, and I think that's what's been criticized by millennials and the generation after mine, is that there's not a willingness necessarily to do. The criticism is that there's not a willingness to do that, and we're coming in having all the answers. So I think that it takes the humility to follow that advice.
But let me say, the reason they're having a hard time with it is because they grew up where everyone won.
Right.
All the time.
The trophies,
You
okay.
all walk home with the trophy, whether you won a game or not.
I think that's a little.
whole stack of trophies.
I mean, you know, I'm hearing now, we need a purpose to go to work.
There were winners.
There's, you know, we're all trying to navigate.
There were
these
winners
things.
and losers when I played sports. All right. That's a whole cliche now. I feel like.
Participation.
Yes, just for participating, just for being there,
And that's
right?
from a generational standpoint, I think, and I call myself a curious boomer. You know, there's just some things we experienced. I experienced the you know, little silk bow tie with the darts. I know.
Say no. Say no.
Yes, I did.
Say no.
Yes, I did.
Clutching my pearls.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Yes, I
I see
did.
flashbacks.
Yes, I did. And so by the time, you know, the next generation came along, it was like, oh no, those were gone. So you never even had that vision. It's like never heard the phone ring before on the wall. Never talk on the phone with a cord.
Or a phone with rotary that you
Thing.
dial.
Right? And then by
I remember
the
those.
time,
I remember those. I got
by
you.
the time millennials and Gen Z show up, it's like we're wearing, you know, our natural hair. Like, oh my gosh. Like, there's just so many nuances that have changed over time. And I do think, to your earlier point, Channing, it's for the better. But I think we have to be patient.
Yeah.
We have to be patient, and we can't just poo-poo what happened in the past.
Well, you also have to understand that your generation, there are people who are running the companies who are of my generation. And people of my generation, not all of us, because I'm age fluid, but people
You and me both.
Yes, I'm age fluid.
Yes.
That's a new one.
But
I'm on the cusp of
Thank
all
you.
of them.
Locally and age fluid. I got it.
New one, yeah.
But they adjust to change a little more slowly. That's why we're not the coveted, you know, group that advertisers come after, because 18 to 34, you're still a little bit interesting in terms of trying new things. Once you reach a certain age, I'm settled, I'm done. So when you come in with a look that I deem inappropriate or inappropriate at work, I judge you. I give you side eye. And then I base my judgment on whether it's impacting your work ability. It's not fair, but that's the reality. And if you come into that situation being very naive, like, I'm just great and you should look beyond all of this, it doesn't happen that way.
Yeah.
And I think you're caught off guard.
Yeah.
So the benefit, the upside, the perk is you have a chance at winning your game.
Right. But to your point about the war for talent, if we're in a historic labor shortage, the employer side is going to have to get on board with some things they might not be completely comfortable with. And we're trying to break this down with people returning from incarceration. There's all kinds of legal barriers for getting, so we're trying to assess, do you really need a high school or a college degree to do this job? So I think assessing the barometers of what makes you successful in the workplace are being looked at. And I think I do think that's a positive development.
Yeah.
Well, to your point on the future of work, it's like, it's changing all over the place on how work gets organized and what do you need to do, or what do you need to be able to do a role. And formal education, I'm still a proponent of it. So let me just say that. But at the same time, because of the advances with technology, some things you just don't need to have a degree to do anymore.
Well, that's the thing, and we're trying to push, because we push, and that's a whole other kind of topic that could probably last a whole other show. But as far as thinking of college or universities as, I mean, you can get an earn and learn program, start off at $90,000 making money and learning their trade. That's what, I do think we need to destigmatize blue collar jobs, because they can provide a living.
Well, you know, I've got teams of developers who work for us who don't have college degrees and who are making six digits, not six digits, six figures.
But when you look at some of the, you're in the tech space, when you look at some of these tech entrepreneurs, they're, you know, they're hoodie wearing individuals. You know, so when we, you know, I've asked the question oftentimes in the financial services space, what's the value of a sport coat? What's the value of a tie?
So it's interesting that you all should say that, because I no longer work in corporate America. I spent many years there, and would never have shown up not dressed corporate-y. So when I got dressed tonight, I'm like, I don't work in corporate America. There's no boss watching me to see how I show up when I'm dressing. And the topic itself tonight that we're talking about, it has to do with how we're showing up. Y'all suited and booted up. All of you all are suited and booted up. And
Because we came from the office, Cheryl.
okay. So I rest my case.
On that note, well, there you have it. Respectability politics may be a new term for most of us, but it's equally an old practice for most of us. Like it or not, marginalization comes with being hyper-conscious of how we sound, how we look, and what we say in order to appear acceptable to dominant cultural groups. Navigating these situations can be daunting, yet necessary. And deciding when or why to mask aspects of ourselves can be a politically savvy move, as is maintaining an I am who I am approach. The answer is, it depends. What's most important is to do you and embrace it fully. Until next time, remember to live, laugh, and love. Thanks for watching.